You've probably wondered what would happen if Zeus just showed up tomorrow, like actually appeared on Earth in 2026, immortal, all-powerful, demanding sacrifices and respect. But here's the thing nobody talks about. The Greek gods wouldn't survive a single week in the modern world. And I don't mean they'd lose a fight to the military. I mean they'd starve to death, go insane from sensory overload, or literally collapse from the metabolic demands of maintaining a physical body. Let's start with the most obvious problem: food. Immortality in Greek mythology wasn't about being indestructible. It was about not aging, not getting diseases, and not dying from wounds. But you still needed to eat a lot. The gods in Homer's epics are constantly consuming ambrosia and nectar, which were never really defined as normal food. They were described as these mystical substances that humans couldn't even taste without dying. That's not poetry. That's a hint at a real biological problem. An immortal being would need an insane amount of calories just to maintain metabolic functions. We're talking somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 calories per day if we're being conservative. That's not because they'd be more active than humans. It's because the biological machinery required to repair cellular damage infinitely, to maintain eternal youth, to prevent cellular senescence, all of that burns energy at a rate we can barely conceptualize. But here's where it gets worse. They'd have to eat ambrosia and nectar, right? Because regular human food wouldn't sustain that metabolic rate. And where are they going to get ambrosia in 2024? It's not sold at Whole Foods. There's no supply chain. There's no farm in Greece still growing it. They'd have to find a way to synthesize it or grow it themselves, and they'd need thousands of pounds of it every single day just to keep their bodies from shutting down. This is why the gods stayed on Mount Olympus. It wasn't political, it was logistical. Now let's talk about what would actually happen if they tried to live like regular humans. Zeus would need a mansion, not because he's vain, though he definitely is. He'd need it because his body would require constant environmental control. Immortal beings would be exquisitely sensitive to temperature fluctuations. Their cellular systems would be so finely tuned to prevent aging that even small variations in body temperature would cause cascading failures. He'd need his house kept at a precise temperature 24/7. Fluctuating more than a degree either way would start degrading his immortal system. Athena would go blind within a month. This sounds dramatic, but think about it. Immortal eyes would be optimized for the specific light conditions of Mount Olympus, which existed in a kind of eternal golden hour. Greek vase paintings show the gods always in perfect lighting, always glowing. That's not just art, that's a clue. She'd step outside into modern sunlight, and the UV radiation combined with the unnatural brightness of artificial lights would start damaging her retinas immediately. Not in a way that would kill her, remember, immortal, but in a way that would cause progressive vision loss until she was functionally blind. She'd need to wear specialized protective eyewear constantly, and she'd have to retrofit any building she lived in with light filtering systems. Poseidon would develop chronic migraines that would make him violent. His entire physiology was adapted to the electromagnetic environment of the ocean. Water conducts electricity at a different rate than air. Humans have a weak electromagnetic field that's barely measurable, but an immortal being's would be much stronger. It would have to be to coordinate the complex cellular processes required for eternal life. When Poseidon moved away from the ocean, away from that electromagnetic stability, his nervous system would start misfiring. Constant, debilitating headaches, mood instability, confusion. He'd probably end up in a psychiatric hospital within 6 months, and his doctors would have absolutely no idea what was wrong with him. But the real crisis would be psychological. The Greek gods were immortal, which means they experienced time differently than humans. But they also lived in a universe where they mattered. They had worshippers, they had temples, they had a role. Put them on modern Earth, and suddenly that entire structure collapses. They'd have maybe 3 people who recognize who they are, and those 3 people would probably try to call a doctor. Hermes would likely develop severe anxiety disorder within weeks. His entire purpose was communication and movement. In the ancient world, he was essential. A message took months to travel. He was needed. In 2024, emails move faster than the speed of light, and his services are literally obsolete. He'd watch the world operate perfectly fine without him, and it would destroy him psychologically. Aphrodite would struggle with something even more fundamental: the collapse of physical beauty standards. She embodied the ideals of classical beauty: symmetrical features, a specific body shape, a particular type of presence that was considered universally attractive in ancient Greece. Modern Earth has completely fragmented beauty standards. What's attractive in Tokyo looks different from what's attractive in Lagos, which looks different from what's attractive in Sao Paulo. Her power, her entire metaphysical influence, would be diluted across a million contradictory aesthetic frameworks. She'd essentially become powerless, and an immortal god who loses power is basically a human who remembers being a god. And then there's the surveillance problem. The Greek gods could hide from humans for centuries because humans couldn't track them. They could take different forms, move between locations, disappear into forests or mountains. But a modern immortal being can't do any of that. The moment one of them stays in one location for more than a few days, they'd show up on multiple security cameras. Their face would be flagged by facial recognition systems. They'd have to pay taxes, get a driver's license, open a bank account. They'd leave a digital trail that would make them impossible to hide. Within a week of trying to live as a normal citizen, Ares would be arrested by the FBI. Not because he'd start a war, but because his behavior patterns would trigger every single alert system designed to identify dangerous individuals. His biometric data would match no previous records. His background would be non-existent. He wouldn't be able to explain where he came from or how old he is. The truth is, the Greek god's immortality was only sustainable within a specific metaphysical and social context. They needed worshippers for psychological stability. They needed an environment that matched their biological adaptations. They needed a world where being superhuman made sense. On modern Earth, immortality would be a slow, grinding torture. They wouldn't die, that was the whole point of being immortal, but they'd suffer in ways that would make dying look like mercy. They'd lose their power, their purpose, their mental stability, and their freedom, one piece at a time, while watching the world they used to rule function perfectly fine without them. The question isn't whether Greek gods could survive on Earth. The question is whether surviving without any of the things that made them who they were would actually be survival at all.